hello, and thank you for your patience. Yes, it is finally time for another coming out story. I'm Emma Goswell, and I'm your host, and it's brought to you by What Goes On Media. And we bring you stories from right across the globe that you probably wouldn't hear anywhere else, to be honest. Stories that will hopefully inspire you if you are part of our wonderful rainbow family, or if you're an ally, stories that may help you understand the LGBTQ people in your life a little bit better. So last episode, we promised that you'd hear from a gay wedding planner called Jason next, but apologies, you will have to wait until the following episode because, well, for reasons that will soon become apparent, we just had to bring you Kris's story next. Kris Saim is a gay man from Kansas. He's currently in his early 50s, but he didn't come out until he was in his 30s. Not surprising, when the Pentecostal church that he was part of for his entire childhood and early years literally told him he was an abomination. Such an awful word, isn't it? And when he finally came out, he had a wife and 2 children. But the most surprising thing about his coming out story, I think, is that he came out to his entire workplace before he came out to a single friend or family member. Find out a little bit later how that happened. But I do need to give you a trigger warning ahead of this episode because it's tough. We do talk about sexual abuse, and as well as that, we also talk about terminal illness. Because 4 years ago, Kris was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Now, from his chemo chair, he decided to write 74 goodbye letters to all the people in his life that he loves. But then instead of posting them, his husband suggested that he read them out loud. He did exactly that, and he's now the host of the incredibly powerful Dying Out Loud podcast, which I urge you all to have a listen to afterwards. I caught up with Kris a few weeks ago, so let's meet him.
I live currently in Kansas City, Missouri, which is pretty much the heartland of the United States, right in the center of the map. My dad was in the military, so I grew up in a lot of places, but my birthplace was Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, which is about 45 minutes away from where I live right now. My parents actually own a farm outside of the Leavenworth area, so I went to high school in that area also. As soon as I was able to move downtown, though, I moved to the city where there are a lot more people that you can interact with and that you can meet that are more similar to yourself. So,
Which is important. I think most British people, I'm going to say myself included, don't know anything about Kansas apart from it is in that famous line from The Wizard of Oz. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto.
That's right. Yes. I've always found that to be, in my international travel, the way to introduce yourself to anyone. And certainly in the gay community, you know, they used to refer to, you know, gay men as friends of Dorothy, and they're speaking of Dorothy and The Wizard of Oz.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is always a great way to start a conversation. I don't think I've ever asked anyone if they've heard of The Wizard of Oz and have gotten a no. I think everyone from every continent has always said, yes, I know The Wizard of Oz. And I said, well, that is where I'm from, not The Wizard
global,
of Oz.
Global, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
It definitely is.
So how was it growing up in that area or the vicinity, you know, and knowing, you know
I'd love to
you have
say
those feelings?
It was a positive experience, but it definitely was not. Even today, we live in some of the more conservative areas of the United States. Kansas City itself is a safe haven for the LGBTQ plus community. We have a really heavy focus on our trans brothers and sisters right now because of everything that they are, you know, facing in the United States. And I'm sure you've seen all of the news. Our government is in shambles. We're being led by a buffoon. He's literally doing everything he can do to break down all of the safety nets that we've put in place to protect our community. So I'd say, quite honestly, I don't think it's even gotten any easier. I think because young people see more gay role models today in the public eye, in the media, on television and in film, I think that it might be a little easier to come out today, but what they face is every bit as real. And negative as what I faced growing up. And I was born in 1973. So at those very early ages, I had, 1, 2, 3, 4, I had no idea what being gay meant. Unfortunately for me, I had my first sexual experience at the age of 4. I was abused by a friend of the family. And
Gosh.
that was my first experience with same sex interaction. And because that was such a fearful thing, I did as what every child that experiences that do. You sort of learn to hide really well right away, because it's certainly nothing that you want your parents to know or anyone that's close to you to know. And also, you don't even have words. You just start to learn that there are certain parts of your body that are not safe. And I think because of that experience, being in the closet really throughout my childhood and my young adulthood, because I did not come out until I was 31.
Gosh, okay. And I guess that's something that you didn't talk about at the time and didn't report.
Definitely not. And also growing up in a very conservative area of our country, even my parents, whenever they saw a gay person on TV, like the things that were said, and I love my parents very much. And when I came out, they obviously embraced me. But growing up, the reality is that being gay was one of the doctrines in the Pentecostal church. And, there's not a lot of weighing of sins really in the Bible or when you go to church, but the Pentecostal church does place homosexuality as one of the biggest sins that you can commit.
And that's the church they were in, I guess, yeah?
That is the church that they were in, and that was the church that I was raised in, and I spent almost 31 years in that church. So from the time I was a young boy going to Sunday school and then going to the chapel, which is where the big adult church service happens, where you sat with your parents and listened to the pastor speak, I lived those young years learning that who I was an abomination. And that strikes a fear in you that is really hard to explain or for other people to grasp unless they've been through something similar. But to hear that, it's not just the sheer act, but it was me, like as a human being, like I was the abomination. That was a very hard thing to handle. I mean, first, as a young person, from the age of 4 to 16, that sexual abuse continued. So I had that secret that I was dealing with and holding on to. And then, of course, growing up, you start to come to realization that you do have an attraction to other boys, which makes you different from everyone around you. I had both of those secrets that, I just locked away in such a far corner of my mind. Obviously, I thought about them every day, but they were locked away in a safe space.
And I'm guessing because of the church involvement and because of when it was as well, you wouldn't have had any gay role models, or you wouldn't have known any gay people, would you, where you lived?
No, none at all. Quite honestly, I went to a rural high school. So we were out in the middle of farmland, and there were 35 people in my senior class. I knew all of them very well. And my gaydar did not pick up anyone else. I did learn far after graduation that a girl that I was friends with, that she did come out as a lesbian, and we reconnected in adulthood. And, of course, we shared similar horror stories from our school, but she also came from a family that had been in that community for a long time. So she sort of had a built-in, community already and support, in spite of the fact that she was a lesbian and having those feelings. Other than that, though, I wasn't really exposed to any gay people in real life until college. Unfortunately for me, it was too late. because in my church upbringing, we learned about marrying your best friend and starting a family with that person. And at the age of 19, when my children's mother was 20, we decided to get married. I mean, I thought that was the next step to push the gay away, right? I had tried lots of other things. I certainly had prayed many, many nights, like, take this away from me, take this away from me. And it wasn't really until I met some gay friends by working at the Gap in my college years that I realized, oh, well, there are way more folks than just me. As a matter of fact, there's a whole world of them out there that I had just never gotten to experience.
So during the whole college years, you never got to have any boyfriends or same-sex experiences?
No, I was already married. My freshman year of college, during spring break, I was married to my children's mother.
Wow.
And we had been best friends all through high school. We'd shared tons of secrets and adventures and laughs and good times. And I thought, if I have to marry someone, I guess this is the person that I'm going to marry. And we gave that a try for almost 12 years.
But did she know what she was getting into? I mean, did you say to her ever about your true feelings about
the funniest
men?
thing ever, Emma, I have to say, is that my children's mother, my parents, everyone always says they had no idea.
Wow.
But when I look back at my childhood, I mean, I was a very flamboyant child. I was involved in theater from a young age. I sang from a young age. I was always competing in like a singing competition. If people were having weddings, I was singing at their weddings.
And you weren't excelling at football or any of the other so-called sports?
I didn't even know how to play football until I was probably almost 40. And then I understood it after watching a couple of games with our local team. So I did play a little bit of basketball, but I wasn't great at it. And I certainly didn't give any of that athlete energy.
Well, it just goes to show we're always hiding in plain sight, aren't we, really? But if people are so set in their straight heteronormative ways, they don't see it sometimes, do they?
It just amazes me. I think maybe part of that is because I am a perceptive person. And when I meet someone and they're sharing about themselves, usually I can pick up things about them that they're not necessarily saying out loud just by listening to the things that they're saying. And it's been one of the more interesting things in life, certainly after coming out. I think one of the things that I love to be able to do is help people see like how great life can be for you once you take that step, because my life got exponentially better after that, exponentially. And all of my work success started to happen after I came out because I was being authentic for the first time in my entire life.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's hear how you got there then. I mean, I'm guessing no regrets, because it sounds like your wife was a wonderful woman and you had 2 wonderful children. So,
no regrets. Actually, I can still say today that my children's mother is one of my closest friends.
Yeah.
She's definitely on the top 5 list of people that if I have big major life news, I call her. I don't rely on my kids to share that with her, and she does the same for me. So in that regard, I feel extra just lucky and thankful that things worked out the way they did. And we have created 2 of the most amazing children who both now have their own families and have both blessed us with at least 1 grandchild. Just looking at my children and their parenting skills, it's one of the biggest rewards ever. Yeah. But the road to coming out was definitely paved with lots of cuts and bruises, for sure. It was a difficult journey. One of the, I think, best little stories or anecdotes I can share from my childhood is around the time I turned 12, my parents were surprising me with a trip to the bicycle shop to actually pick out a new bicycle.
Oh, lovely.
But I was completely oblivious to this. And the previous night, I had actually had a sleepover with one of my abusers. And he had done something to me that night that he had never done before. And the next morning, the morning that we were going to get that bike, our phone rang a little earlier than usual, and his mom was on the phone and she wanted to talk to my mom. They were like best friends anyway, so that was not atypical. But I was so filled with guilt, like I felt like she knew and she was calling to tell my mom. And then my parents come out after around breakfast and say, hey, we're going to go someplace in Kansas City. Now, mind you, this is in the early 80s, like the height of the AIDS epidemic, where the headlines are gay cancer and people are dropping dead everywhere from this virus. And the only thing I could think of was that my parents had discovered that I was gay and they were taking me to be tested. And because I was so young and I didn't really understand how it worked, and we did not have the internet to, go sit down and type a quick Google search, all that was in my head was, I've been discovered and now I'm going to find out that I have AIDS and I'm going to die. That's a lot for a 12-year-old to have running through their head. Least of all when they're on their way to find out that they're getting a new bicycle for their birthday. The relief that I had once we got there was phenomenal. But the car ride there, which was about 45 minutes long, was A, the longest car ride of my life, and B, probably the most terrifying car ride of my life.
And your parents didn't sort of pick up on any signs of, your distress or, the awful things you've been going through, or you're just too good at hiding it, maybe?
I mean, I think I was probably good at hiding it, but also I don't know that my parents paid attention to that sort of stuff a lot. They were great parents, but they were also, I was their first child and, they were still learning. And I did have a younger brother. He's 6 years younger than me. So once he came into the picture, I mean, that's where a lot of the attention went. And that kind of remained to be the same, for the rest of my life. I mean, quite honestly, it's the same today. He's definitely the favorite child. And we can laugh about that now, though. It's been interesting, though. Like, that story is kind of just a great example of the types of things that I thought about and the way I was experiencing life, being in the closet, for one, and also having dealt with the abuse that I was dealing with.
Gosh, I mean, I was going to mention the AIDS crisis because you would have been a teenager about the same time I was, actually, just when it all kicked off and everyone was terrified and nobody knew what to do and there was so much misinformation. And certainly for young gay men, there was the real threat of getting this thing and dying. It was a terrible time to be gay and to come out, really, without all the abuse that you were suffering as well. So, it's no surprise to me that you went down the route of marrying a woman. But how did you eventually come out, and how did you sort of go, enough is enough, I need to live my authentic life?
So I put a plan in action when I was 29. Took me 2 years to work through that plan in my head and finally share it. But I basically, between Halloween and Thanksgiving of the year that I came out, I told my wife that, I didn't think that I was going to be able to live in our situation as we were living in anymore. I have been really depressed, which was true. I had a high level of anxiety, also true. I loved my children more than anything in the world. But at the same time, I thought if I was never able to be authentically me, what ultimately am I teaching my children? And the version of myself that I have been ever since coming out, and even today, I still consider myself to be on a bit of a life journey. Like, I try to grow every day in some way, shape, or form. This version of me would never have arrived. And this is the person that I was meant to be. And this is how I've been able to be effective in this world and give back to people in a way that a lot of people don't take the time to do. So ultimately, I told her how unhappy I was. And she said, well, we have all the holidays coming up. Like, can we talk about this throughout the holidays, see what we can do? And I said, absolutely. I don't want to ruin the holidays for anyone, but I can 100% assure you that this is not something that I'm going to change my mind about. I just don't want you to feel like there's a way to undo whatever has been done.
Yeah.
And I assured her that it had absolutely nothing to do with her and it had everything to do with me. And when I moved out of our home with the children, I still did not tell her that I was gay.
And she didn't guess? She didn't think?
She still had not guessed. I don't know if maybe that is part of a blocker that takes place in people's mind, that something like that becomes like, well, there's no way that's possible because, we've made 2 children and we've been together since high school.
Well, she probably thought that. Did she think there was another woman in the picture?
She did think that, actually, and there definitely was not. By the way, during that time that I was married was completely a dry spell for me. Like, obviously, the abuse had ended, and quite honestly, that was the majority of the sexual activity I had before I was married. I had no connection with gay men. Even the friends that I had at work and through college, they were strictly platonic friendships. Nothing ever happened until we officially separated, which was in that January after we got through the holiday season. The first day after I moved in with my parents again, and I told my parents that we were getting, so we're separated, but we were going to be getting divorced this spring. And I didn't even tell my parents at that point in time the reason for it, other than just I've been so depressed and anxious. And
at this point, had you not even told a friend? Was this all just in your own head?
Yeah, I had not told anyone. I didn't feel safe, quite honestly, telling another person because I'd seen plenty of movies where one person tells one person a secret, they swear to secrecy, and then the next day, everybody in the place knows.
Yeah.
What did happen, though, that January is someone that I was really great friends with at work said she wanted to take me to lunch. And when we went to lunch, I felt like she was the safest person and this was the safest space on earth. And I told her that day that my wife and I were separating. And the reason for that is because I'm gay. And she was so elated that I came out to her. She jumped up from the restaurant table, ran around the corner and just embraced me with every little bit of her 5'4", 115-pound frame could give. And I'm 6'4", by the way. You can't tell from sitting here, but that's like 196 centimeters tall also.
Oh, so she was so chuffed that you'd chosen her.
She was so excited. She was so excited. And
but she was your safe person.
Yeah, 100%. We were really great friends inside and outside of work. And again, in that moment, I had just never felt safer. And like, this is the time to say it. And I'll tell you what, while we finished that lunch, she asked me if it's still a secret or if she could tell people. And she specifically said, can I tell people at work? And my answer was, you can tell everyone at work because that saves me the hassle of having a coming out conversation with them all. By 3:00 that afternoon, I had received more than 150 different communications from people in our agency, all with that same level of excitement. And people would come to my desk at random that afternoon and just give me a hug. And then I started getting all these invites, like to go out to places. And the first Friday night after that lunch conversation, the girl who I came out to, her best friend set me up on my first blind date. Well, that was my first and my last because it was not the best thing. It was one of those things where I have a gay friend. You might like him.
Yeah.
No,
well, they think all gays know each other as well.
They also do. Yes, they definitely do.
This is fascinating. This is quite unique to have your entire workplace know before a single member in your family or your wife, who you're still married to, presumably at this point.
And it was almost like living a double life, but with permission, because we obviously were separated and we knew that we were getting divorced. We had already started working on the divorce proceedings by the time I had told her. But that gave me the courage to meet up with other friends and tell them the news. And my fear my entire life had been the horror stories that I had heard about people who lose their friends and lose their families and just have horrible, horrible experiences. And I couldn't afford, like I was already depressed and anxious. And if my parents would have written me off, or, if I would have felt ostracized in any way, I don't know if I would have been able to handle that, especially being 31 years old at the time. I mean, that's supposed to be like the prime of your life when everything is happening in your career and your personal life. We made arrangements for like the kids to come every weekend. We co-parented extremely well together. And about 2 months after I had moved into Kansas City and really restarted my life, my sister-in-law, my children's mother's sister, she found a Match.com gay dating profile that I had. And she told
Where was she digging for that?
I don't know. I don't know if she was on Match.com or if she was actually doing the digging. I think she was doing the digging. I think she thought that I was probably gay. So she was out there looking to see if I was on anything. But
so what
she
happened?
told my children's mother that I was gay, and she shared the profile. And that made that conversation really easy too. For the first 3 months, she was very non-communicative and a little upset. And I tried to give her space, because I can only imagine when you spend 10 to 12 years with someone that you think and then you find out they have the secret, it's probably very unnerving, and it starts to make you question a lot of things about yourself. But
of course,
it took probably like in between that 3 to 6 months time period, and we sort of started to bounce back really quickly. We realized obviously the kids are the priority, and this gives her an opportunity to go and find someone, a real true love. I mean, I truly loved her, just not in that way, of course. And it certainly allowed me to find that.
Were you annoyed with the woman that basically outed you to your then wife?
I think if it would have happened like today, because I realized the brevity of every person owns their story, and you should only come out whenever you are ready. But I also think it would have been such a difficult conversation for me to start with her that I almost appreciated it.
Okay.
Now, mind you, we're like 3 months into after I've moved out, and I still haven't told my parents. But once I knew that she knew, I had been like researching books at Barnes and Noble that you could give your parents so that they could kind of understand like you're coming out, and this is probably what it's been like for you keeping the secret. And I purchased that book for my parents, and I wrote my parents a letter. And I actually went to my mom's place of work, and in between her seeing patients, I was in her office waiting, and she popped in, and I'm like, hey, I just brought this over for you real quick. I was running through town, and I just want you to take a read of this letter. And she read the letter. And of course, the letter was, my entire coming out situation.
And she read it in front of you? Is that
she did. I wanted her to, because
okay.
You never know if people are going to do that or not. She might have set it down on her desk and she would have never found it again. But she read it in front of me. And then she was crying by the end of the letter, and she hugged me and she said, "It's okay. We will fix it." And I said, "There's nothing that we can fix. I've tried for 31 years on my own to fix it. And the only thing left to do is to be real about it. And this is what I'm doing today, is being real about it." And because of her reaction saying that we could fix it, which by the way, sounded like she was going to send me to a camp where they tried to reverse my brain function.
Which goes on in America, we know that.
Yes, and it's terrifying. And I would never submit someone to that, nor would I allow myself to be submitted to that. But she went home and she told my dad and my brother, and my dad called me, and he doesn't ever call. And we talked about it all. And I said, yes, I have known this since I probably have been 5 years old. And I have always been terrified for you all to find out. But he told me that he loved me at the end of that phone call and he was very proud of me. And I didn't talk to my brother that day, but I did see my brother that weekend. And even my little brother, who at that point in time was around the 8th or 9th grade, and very macho and jockey and sporty, he hugged me the moment he saw me and he said, I've always got your back, always.
Oh,
and
cool.
I think in that coming out moment, our family shared more love than we've ever shared before. And it has continued since then. It's like after that moment, we just continued to tell each other how much we cared about each other. And I don't know if our family would ever have figured out the way to do that without my coming out story.
Every family needs a gay, don't they, to bring them together?
I absolutely agree. And if they don't have one, then they need to make friends with one just so that they can see. But it's so true. It's, I'm sure that my parents maybe heard things from other people that they work with that might not have been positive. And certainly our church life looked very different. I mean, I was a youth leader at my church. I was a worship leader at my church. So, I was in front of people all the time. I personally stepped back, and whenever I told my pastor, I came out to my pastor as well. And I said, I don't feel like I can lead like I have been able to lead thus far with people knowing this because of what our church teaches. And he agreed, and I stepped away, but I still even had a great relationship with my pastor and his family, who I had known and loved for several years. But at the same time, the church didn't change its teachings. They still talk negatively about gay people today. And I'm not going to sit and listen to that. I don't need to be around that. And of course, that has caused a lot of questions. And I think I probably at this point, I feel like there's something in the universe, but I don't think that it is what I was taught in Sunday school.
Before we move on to your podcast, which I do want to give you a chance to talk about briefly,
Sure.
My main question is, what was it like coming out to your kids? Because that's a big deal as well, that not a lot of people have to go through.
Oh, it's a funny story. My kids were actually on my computer, and gay.com used to be a website where you could go and talk to people. It wasn't really like a grinder. I mean, I'm sure some people used it as that, but I was actually trying to legitimately make friends because I had no gay friends.
Yeah.
And my daughter asked me what gay.com was. And I told her that it is a site for gay men to meet other gay men. And I said, and I am gay. And she's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, just what I said. It's for men who like other men. And she asked a question that, so does that mean that you won't be dating girls? And I said, that's exactly what it means. And my daughter took it very well. My son, he was a little bit younger. He's younger than her. And I don't think he understood really at all. And he didn't care. Like, he just wanted to have fun.
How old was she, sorry, when you had that conversation?
We probably had that conversation when she was about 12.
Oh, gosh, okay.
Yeah. And so that would have made my son he would have been 8 then. But both of the kids, as life continued, I did meet someone and fell in love, and we became partners, and we eventually got married. We also eventually got divorced. But he was in their lives for 14 years. And, he probably wasn't the best extra parent. The best extra parent is the man I am married to today. But they experienced a lot of things. Modern Family, the TV show, became like a big hit during that time. And we were kind of living our own Modern Family, like with both of the kids. And whenever we went to the kids' sporting events or graduations, my children's mother, her husband, my husband, and myself, we all sat together you could see very clearly that we all still had a lot of love for each other.
Right.
And that's what my kids grew up talking about is even on my podcast episode with my children, where I'm reading them a letter that I wrote to the two of them, my son has always said he grew up seeing how much his mother and I still cared for each other, even though we knew we couldn't be married to each other anymore. And he bases a lot of his life and love decisions on the way he watched us interact with each other. And that made me a little bit proud because that's a big thing for a kid to notice and carry with them.
Yeah. Well, in the few minutes we have left, I would like to talk about your podcast. And it was really interesting hearing you say about how your coming out actually brought your family closer together. And it was that outpouring of love, actually, that was really surprising. And I feel like that's what you're trying to do with your podcast. And it is a totally unique thing that you're doing. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know we had to cancel last week because you weren't very well, and it's very difficult because you're going through all this chemotherapy and all this treatment. There can't be many people that take the time out of the day to talk to some aged lesbian sitting on a sofa in Manchester and doing their own podcast.
I love it. I'm so excited to be here.
I know, but to do all that with stage 4 cancer, I mean, it's remarkable, really, that you know what you're still achieving and what you're still doing. But for people who don't know about your podcast, just tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So I started my podcast. It's called Dying Out Loud. I started Dying Out Loud really at the prompt of my husband, we had collected 74 letters that I had written initially with the intention of this just gets these thoughts out of my head and onto paper. But I had 74 really beautiful letters to people that, you know, from friends from way back in elementary school to college friends, coworkers, every significant adult, like my favorite teacher from high school.
Wow.
All of those types of people I had written a letter to. And my husband had said, rather than trying to mail those letters or, you know, just record a video with them, he said, why don't we make this a podcast? So we did. And we've been running an episode a week for about a year now. And we've gotten through about half of the letters. But the premise of the podcast is really about speaking what's on your mind while you have the time to do it. You know, we all know that any of us could go at any time, right? I could walk out of my building tonight and be struck by a car, and that could be it. But whenever you have a terminal illness sitting on your shoulder, you know that inevitably that hourglass of time, it's probably going to run out when you least expect it. And I wanted to make sure that I was giving these messages to people while I could do it. And before I start to look like I'm falling to pieces, because I know that will also happen at some point in time. I won't look like I'm more healthy than more sick. And I count that as a blessing.
Well, you are looking great tonight, I have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Really good to see.
You know, whenever my skin doesn't look gray, I feel like it's an extra good day. So today's one of those days. But the podcast has become like this beautiful thing. And I've heard from people all around the world who, you know, who this resonates with in one way or the other. Like I've heard from people who lost their parent, then they were fighting whenever they lost their parent and they never got to have that closure. I've heard from people who just would love to hear those words of love and pride, you know, that their parents may never have shared with them. And I had the opportunity to share, you know, those words with my children. And I wrote a really long letter to my coworkers. And I really tribute a lot of my energy and health and the way I've been able to do other things besides just exist to my coworkers, because I think that support is really, it's been so much more helpful to me than the chemo or the radiation or any of the treatments of modern medicine. It did something to me that really drove me to want to continue talking. And to your point about having energy to do something like a podcast, quite honestly, as long as I have a voice, I do not intend to shut up. I will be dying
Good.
out loud until it actually happens.
Good. Well, I normally end by asking people for advice to other people who haven't yet come out, or advice to your younger self. But I feel like with yourself in your sort of unique situation, I wonder if the advice should be not just about coming out, but just life advice. Because I feel like this is your legacy, this podcast, isn't it? And you really are doing what you want to do before the day comes. You are saying thank you and saying those messages to all those people. But for people listening, what advice would you like to impart to people?
Absolutely. I think it's still probably geared to the younger version of me, because I know there are millions of them around the world, young men and young women who are experiencing these thoughts, and they're terrified because they haven't found the person that they can share their true, authentic self with. My advice to them is twofold. One, be patient, because you will find a community and you will find a safe space. You just have to be patient, because you want to make sure that whenever you think it's someone that you're safe with, that you are truly safe with that individual. And when you know that, you definitely know that. So wait until you find that person to be safe with before you share the depths of your soul with them. And the other thing is, I would love to see a world in which we are all dying out loud every day. There's so many conversations that aren't happening between family members, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, husbands and husbands, wives and wives. We're just hanging on to something because we feel like it's a minute detail or it's not important. Let's just go ahead and say it. I don't go to sleep ever without telling my husband that I love him at the end of the night. I mean, I think sometimes I tell him I love him when he's walking to the bathroom from the couch. So it's just important for people to know that you love them, that you're proud of them, that you appreciate them.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've realized that more than I have realized that in the last 4 years, especially as I look at, my own time running out. That's advice that I would love for everyone to grasp onto and just carry with them, is we all have this moment right now to share a message, and you can sit in silence and let that moment pass you by, or you can pick up the phone and send that text message, or God forbid, dial the number and actually speak to a person on the phone.
Not just voice note them. Yeah.
Exactly. But you have time to send those messages, and I highly recommend you do it.
You do. Well, I'm going to tell you something now, Kris. Very sadly, my sister passed away in 2020 from
my goodness,
cancer. And funnily enough, I actually did record a podcast with her, which is still sitting on my computer, and I've never released it. And I'm still planning on doing that. And I wish I'd had more of a conversation like you'd had with your loved ones. It wasn't in my head at the time when I was recording it. It was more about reliving our childhood memories and talking about all our memories, because I knew I would never get the chance to be an old lady and reminisce with her. So it was more about that rather than thanking her for being a brilliant sister, which I kind of wish it was now, but it is what it is.
I love that you did that, though.
But
what a
I'm a podcaster. That's what you do. You record stuff, and I'm glad I did.
Treasure that you have for yourself.
Yeah, but it's tough listening back, which I only do very occasionally. But at some point, I will put it out there in the world. But also, I think, the same way with her, the same way with you, people that are closer to death have this huge understanding about the world, and they just become almost different than they've been for the rest of their lives. They have this almost power to know everything and just be so knowledgeable and so almost peaceful with it and understand more than we can ever understand. I feel like I'm gabbling, but I'm hoping that
you're not.
Said it's somewhere in there.
Quite honestly, I understand so much of what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. It's not that I feel like I have this whole new set of information, but before this diagnosis, I think I was very scared about the concept or the act of dying.
Yeah.
And I am not afraid of that at all. The part I'm afraid of is the morning that I don't wake up and what that leaves for my children and my husband and my mom and my brother. That's what I fear. And I think that's one of the reasons the podcast has become such a tremendous passion for me, is the podcast helps make sure that there's something of me that they can have forever. And if they just want to hear the letter that I wrote to them, it exists, and they can fast forward and listen to just that letter and hear those words. And if there was anything bigger or better that I could do to set them at all at ease, I would do that. But I feel like this is one of the best gifts that I can give myself and give them.
What an incredible legacy you created. Kris, I'm
Thank
going to urge all my listeners to listen to your podcast as well, because it really is something
Wonderful. I appreciate
quite
that.
special.
And I will do the same. I've already been listening to older episodes. So I used to take in people's coming out stories like so much. Like I wanted to know, like, did you struggle the whole entire time growing up, or was it just like the bullying that you experienced? But listening to, some of the horror stories, and then listening to some other people that were very fortunate as well, it's such an enlightening experience. And I think it kind of helps me have hope that there is going to come a day when we don't need to spend time in the closet. And if we do spend time in the closet, it's much shorter than 3 decades. So I'm hopeful that we are getting there.
A massive, massive thank you to Kris. Gosh, there aren't many people who would do a full interview while being subjected to chemo for terminal cancer. Yeah, it was a difficult interview for many, many reasons. And of course, if you've been affected by cancer too, and let's face it, there aren't many people on the planet who haven't, then I do hope you found some hope and love amongst all the emotions it will have stirred up. Please do have a search for his podcast. Just look for Dying Out Loud. It is powerful beyond words. Who knows, I may even one day get round to releasing the podcast I made with my sister. It is hard hearing Abigail's voice, but I do want her to be heard. So hey, watch this space. Right, next time on this podcast, you will finally get to meet Jason Mitchell-Kahn. He's an LGBT wedding planner based in New York. He's also a gay man who has a gay sister and a mum who worked in musical theatre.
Well, I mean, I often think, I don't know what my mother would have done had she had a straight son. I mean, she's the target audience for gay children. Not only being in theater, but just their sort of taste level. I mean, my mom's 2 favorite artists still are Bette Midler and Barbra Streisand. So, I mean, I grew up with, them singing in my house, and it's like almost I had no choice than to be gay.
Yeah. She wanted gay children. She switched on to the gay agenda.
100%.